Hello and welcome to Tax Matters. I'm Chamaka Ohauchi. This program, Tax Matters, is your home for information and education on taxation. And in keeping with that, we'll begin this episode on an educational note. Today, we are looking at tax filing obligations of a newly registered limited liability company. The Companies Income Tax Act gives a company or a company owner 18 months from the date of commencement of business as the due date for filing and payment of company's income tax. For example, if a company was registered on July 10, 2022, its company's income tax and associated taxes like education tax become due in January 2024. This is because a company has 12 months as its accounting year. This can be from any month in a year to the 12th month. From the 12th month, the company has 6 months to file company's income tax returns and pay. Only banks are required by law to use January to December as the accounting year. However, company's income tax is not the only tax obligations that a limited liability company has. From day one, a limited liability company is liable to pay and collect VAT. If a company is setting up a hotel, it is assumed that the hotel will either be built from scratch or will emanate from an existing landed property, which will be renovated to specification. That presupposes that even before the hotel takes in its first guest, it is already carrying out business transactions with building contractors and subcontractors, purchase of beddings, furniture, bedroom fittings, generators, etc., etc. In all these instances, VAT arises. The company is obliged to deduct VAT from payments made to contractors and subcontractors engaged in putting up the hotel. And where the company purchases materials like air conditioners, beddings and fittings from suppliers, and VAT is paid as part of the purchase price, the purchasing company, in this instance the hotel, is also obliged by law to inform the FRS in its monthly VAT filing. The rate of VAT in Nigeria is currently 7.5%. The same scenario also applies to withholding tax. The rates of withholding tax are on your screen. There are penalties imposed for failure to file and failure to pay both VAT and withholding tax. We must emphasize here that filing a return is distinct from remittance. For example, the penalty for failure to file monthly VAT returns is 50,000 naira in the first month of default and 25,000 naira for every month in which the default persists. Beyond the tax liability of a company to the FRS, there are other tax obligations to the State Internal Revenue Service where the company is domiciled. If the company has multiple branches spread across more than one state, then the company has business with several internal revenue services. On the screen is a list of taxes and levies payable to the states. The personal emoluments of the company employees are subject to personal income tax. This is called pay as you earn, and it is paid to the state where that staff is resident. Payee is payable on a monthly basis. In conclusion, yes, companies' income tax, education tax, and other applicable federal tax become due at the end of 18 months. But in reality, the tax obligations of limited liability companies actually begin on day one. You're watching Tax Matters. Having laid out the tax obligations of a company, it is important to emphasize that it is not only companies that pay taxes. Persons also pay taxes on their income and on expenses. With regards to income, that is where personal income tax comes in. And with regards to expenses, we are talking about VAT, which is called Goods and Services Tax in some clients. And of course, others like stamp duties, electronic money transfer levy. So to get an economy running, all hands must be on deck. And more importantly, to get companies and individuals to voluntarily pay taxes, good leadership is required. What role does compliance on the part of political office holders play in this regard? In answering that question, we want to take you back to June 2022 when the Joint Tax Board held its 150th quarterly meeting. As you will see presently, tax compliance is critical to national development. The communique.
Communique issued at the end of the 150th meeting of the Joint Tax Board, JTB, held on the 23rd June at Transcorp Hilton, Abuja. The theme of the meeting was Effective Tax Compliance for Political Office Holders, a Panacea for National Development. The board deliberated on various issues and adopted the following resolutions. 1. That it is the statutory and moral duty of every eligible citizen to comply with prompt and accurate payment of tax. Tax compliance should be a prerequisite for holding public office, and intending and serving political office holders should be fully tax compliant before being entrusted with superintending over public funds. 2. Multi-agency collaboration is imperative, and critical stakeholders such as the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, Code of Conduct Bureau, CCB, Nigerian Financial Intelligence Unit, NIFU, National Identity Management Commission, NIMSI, and the 38 revenue authorities at the national and subnational level require a deepening of relationship for enhanced tax compliance among intending and serving political holders.
On the sidelines of the meeting, we spoke to some of the state chairmen. How do you think we can get political office holders and political aspirants, as well as individuals, to become tax compliant?
Every citizen, by law, is expected to pay taxes. And in getting the political office holders to pay taxes, it has to be mainly through the political will of the leaders. When I mean leaders, I mean at the federal level, starting from the presidency, at the state level, starting from the governors, and all the various levels of governance. Now, the key thing is people sometimes look at it that, oh, my wealth is being exposed. But leadership often is by example. And what our political leaders are probably missing is the fact that they are losing more money, more revenue that could have come to their states or to the federal government by being compliant themselves. Because if you as a leader, if you are compliant, then those that are your followers, they will follow through. And a lot of leakages that we are talking about, they will come into the process, and it will be used for the generality of the people, as it were. And again, our leaders as well, they also need to understand that how abreast are they with the laws of the Federation. I mean, people going back to look into the 2004 Personal Income Tax Act, saying that governors, deputy governors, they are exempt, whatever. But this has been repealed with 2011 Act. So they are equally expected to pay. So it is not just the payee. It says all incomes that you earn within and outside of the country, all income earned, accrued, and benefiting to you. So that's what they are supposed to pay. And once you have that political will as regards that area, then you see the leaders and other people paying. Now, when it comes to the generality of the people, it comes to people seeing their money being used for things that they are seeing values for. If your money, you can see it working in terms of the infrastructure that is provided, in terms of life being made easier. A lot of Nigerians now, you see people probably providing their own electricity, providing their own water, but when the government provides all this and they say this is taxpayers' money at work, then they'll be encouraged to pay.
Taxation, they say is law, but even though it's law, there's what we call voluntary compliance. So if we do advocacy, if we sensitize them, let them know the position of the law, and also know that they have an obligation. Politicians are just like every taxable person, which they are supposed to declare their income from all sources, be it rent, interest, dividend, even on gift, just like you and I. So the same law applies to politicians, applies to you and I. It's just making them know of their responsibility, the statutory period. They are to file returns from January to March. You call for returns. You ask them to get their tax clearance certificate, not only because they want to travel. And I think secondly, what we need to do is to be able to get information on every taxable person. By time we have a centralized data where we can pull out information, if somebody bought land, if somebody has bonds somewhere, and all we need to do is to bring information with central bank, vehicle license, land, every information to a pool where once you have information, taxable income will not be hidden, and it will be very easy, because once you present somebody with facts, this is your bank statement, these are houses you have, this is rental income. If they are facts, you and I know that the only thing you do is to pay. But it's when the information is not there and you are waiting on them to voluntarily do it, it is difficult.
Most importantly, I think what needs to be done is constant engagement between the technical people and the political class, because sometimes there's some form of ignorance when it comes to that.
What are the things that need to be done apart from the continuous engagement?
Well, you see, most importantly, there are certain parts of the law that also needs to be further entrenched and further enhanced, so that I think measures that will be taken needs to be punitive. Because if when cases of such is been taken to court, I think you find it most difficult that the people are not being punished for breaking the laws. But once that is done and the laws is being implemented and people are punished for tax evasion and other vices that are against the tax laws, then I think people will begin to comply.
That was in June 2022 at the 150th JTB meeting. But those views still reign true today, especially as the much-awaited general elections are here. Political will, leadership by example, and when we talk about personal income tax, we are talking about incomes from all sources, not just salary, but dividends, rents, incomes earned abroad. And of course, the need for continuous advocacy, the use of data to accurately determine the incomes of persons, also known as data for tax initiative, and of course, enforcement of the laws. Talking about data for tax initiative, we record the response of the Executive Chairman FRS, Chairman Joint Tax Board, to a question posed to him in an earlier episode of the program. Now you are the Chairman of the Joint Tax Board. We would like to know what you are doing at the subnational levels to ensure that we get the high net worth individuals and also taxpayers who are not in the tax net into the tax net.
The key thing is technology. We resolve to collaborate with the Nigeria Identity Management Commission so that we use their database and through a concept we call data for tax initiative, so that if Amaka buys a car, she has a unique identifier called NIL. She must be asked to disclose her NIL. If she's opening a bank account, the same number. When she's going for international passport, the same number. When she's paying her school fees or the school fees of her brothers and sisters, she uses the same number. When she's acquiring land, she uses the same number. When you are investing in stocks, you use the same number. So when you have that, and you have just a unique identity, which we call digital identity. When I tap your name and your name number, everything about you comes up. When you buy land, we see. When you sell it, we see. So the issue of net worth individuals that are trying to dodge taxes will soon come to an end.
We call on everyone to do the needful. That is, voluntarily complying with the tax laws, especially as the Data for Tax initiative is making it more and more impossible to dodge payment of tax. As they say, the goldfish has no hiding place anymore. It pays to pay your tax. Now to the question of the week.
How do I register for TEN? To register for TEN, log on to www.jtb.org.ng and click on JTB TEN registration portal. Then click on register for TEN individual for an individual or register for TEN non-individual if you are a corporate body. Before you log on, get the information now showing on your screen ready. These days, TEN is automatically allocated to companies upon registration with the Corporate Affairs Commission.
Welcome back. So, having laid out the tax obligations of individuals and limited liability companies, and after money has come in, what do we do with the money? Last episode on our tax education segment, we featured tertiary education tax payable by all limited liability companies at the rate of 2.5% of assessable profits. The tax is collected by the FRS and handed over to the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, TETFUND, for disbursement for public tertiary institutions, universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education. Beginning from this episode, we'll be sharing with you just a little of what TETFUND is using taxpayers' money for. The documentary was put together by the FRS and the NTA.
The impact of education tax that we collect cannot be overemphasized.
We have benefited from the building of physical infrastructure.
Now I can go to the library and read any book. Our books are up to date.
Benefited so much in the areas of staff development,
the tax utilization has produced tangible, visible, fillable results.
Before the last decade, many public tertiary institutions of learning had fallen into disrepair and became an eyesore. This was largely due to the absence of the needed financial resources to fund the infrastructure development in these institutions. This is why the education tax was introduced, to provide funding for the nation's public tertiary institutions of learning through tax contributions made from profits of companies in Nigeria. The education tax is 2.5% of a company's profit. It is imposed on all registered companies in Nigeria. The Federal Inland Revenue Service, FIRS, is mandated to collect this tax on behalf of the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, which in turn disburses it to the relevant public tertiary institutions. The fund has in 10 years amounted to 2.5 trillion naira spent on infrastructure and staff development in public universities, polytechnics, and colleges of education. With more effort, more companies are complying in paying this tax. We are seeing improved funding to our tertiary education institutions as a result of the education tax. However, as global economy shrunk due to ravaging COVID-19, it constrained TETFUND from accessing funds to fulfill its mandate.
We took the biggest hit, if you like. Indeed, we are still reeling from that impact. Because, for example, our tax collections precede our year of implementation, meaning that what we are implementing in 2022 are taxes collected in 2021. And what was implemented last year, the taxes collected in 2020. Indeed, the biggest impact we had was last year, where we had a drop of over 68 billion in revenue, and largely because of the impact of COVID.
For Nigeria, the situation did not last too long. the federal government embarked on bringing major changes in the way tax revenues were collected. Wednesday, December 18, 2019, Nigeria's Senate confirmed Mohammed Nami as the new executive chairman who was appointed by President Muhammadu Buhari.
Those in favor say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The nomination of Muhammad Nami is hereby confirmed as chairman of the Federal Inland Revenue Service.
Mohammed Nami's appointment coincided with the period the world witnessed economic slowdown and used the occasion to start introducing series of new innovations and reforms. As tax receipts began to record increase, significant progress in revenue generation is being witnessed, with the education tax making impact on the nation's tertiary education.
The impact of education tax that we collect on behalf of federal government at 2.5%, and which hitherto was 2%, cannot be overemphasized. The reason being, clearly today, if you visit all the tertiary institutions in Nigeria, whether those that were established by the state or those that were established by the federal government itself and being funded by the state and federal government respectively, you will discover that those critical infrastructures are being funded by the education tax that we collect.
In 2021, the Education Intervention Agency received 189 billion naira as proceeds from the Education Tax Fund. Though far below the target set for the year, it was compensated with the National Research Fund, which witnessed an increase from 5 billion naira to 7.5 billion naira in 2020 and 8.5 billion naira in 2021. Now, with a proactive FIRS under the leadership of Mohammed Nami, a whopping 7.405 trillion naira revenue was collected in 2021 and is set to exceed 10.4 trillion naira target in 2022, a sign that the future is bright. From the northwest to the southwest, the southeast to the northeast, and from the south-south to the north-central, heads of tertiary institutions across the 6 geopolitical zones have unanimously attested to the unprecedented impacts of tax funds collected by the Federal Inland Revenue Service in the development of infrastructure, human capital development, and research in these institutions.
Come to BUK and see where the money you give as tax is being utilized. One, the taxpayers' money collected through FRS, which come through to us through TETFUND, is being used, one, to provide structure for learning. It's being used to train the lecturers that teach students. It's being used to provide facilities that both students and teachers or lecturers use in the system.
Federal College of Education of Abuja has no doubt benefited immensely from taxpayers' money through TETFUND interventions in the college. My college, since 2011, has benefited a lot in terms of infrastructural facilities, in terms of capacity building for staff, not only lecturers, but even non-teaching staff, in terms of library interventions, in terms of conferencing and other science and laboratory equipments and more of that. I can attest to the fact that the federal government has really tried, going by the several interventions that we have gotten here.
The money that the federal government is getting from taxpayers has been able to impact greatly on education. The Federal Polytechnic Nekede has benefited immensely from the investment of the federal government in education, especially through the Tertiary Education Trust Fund, which is TETFUND. We have benefited from the building of physical infrastructure, the training of our staff for masters, for PhD, the provision of funds for research. A lot of research has been done in this institution in the last couple of years.
This feature continues next episode. If you have any reaction or any inquiry on any matter on this episode or any matter whatsoever regarding taxes and taxation, get in touch with us on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, by text or by calling. And remember, you can reach out directly to the FRS through the contact center. Thank you for watching. See you next week.